Hello and welcome to something new, I suppose. After the unofficial live stream, there was a bit of feedback that suggested that some people might be interested in a bit of trial content here and there on the side, so thought we'd give that a go. Not sure how it's going to go because I feel like I'm pretty awkward when it comes to talking to myself and trying to fill the dead air, but get into it. So, for anyone not aware, last week we had the unofficial anniversary live stream hosted by Flip, which was a great time, and as part of that there was a couple of fixed party trial challenges where we had to go in and fight a trial with a set party and a few extra build parameters around those. I'll try and link the full thing in the description, but for the parameters we had to use these 6 units here with these specific espers and fight one of them on. So for team-wide gear, the main restrictions were no reflectoring, which is generally pretty handy on this trial, and no active abilities from equipment, so things like Typhus Spirit, Craftsman's Book were all banned, which changed a few strats. And then for specific units, Noppy had to be between 4500 and 5200 attack, and had to have Sword of Kings equipped on his base form. So I've just got his base form set up with some LB fill, and then the shift form for some actual damage in phase 2 with a water weapon, because there wasn't a way to imbue him. Celeste had probably the most individual restrictions, with between 40,000 and 50,000 HP, so we've got her nicely right at the cap there. And then between 1500 and 2500 defense, which in hindsight I don't think actually mattered because Amon doesn't have physical. And then between 4500 and 6k spirit. And that we're kind of on the low end of the spirit, but that's partly because her mandatory equip was Train Conductor here, and that's, because of that has natural regen, that was intended to kind of put her on a timer with the zombie. And so lower spirit actually lowers the amount of healing from that, which is why I didn't mind that being low. And then obviously the most important part of this entire clear was Celeste's shift form gear. There's very few replacements for these things. Excalibur is by far the best weapon selection. Both pieces of the festival gear are vital, and then normally the 2nd and 3rd anniversary rings are seen as direct upgrades, but in this specific situation the 1st anniversary one is very important. And then naturally, to top it off, she has the most important part, Bad Breath. Now, jokes aside, Celeste's shift form is never used in this fight, so that doesn't matter. Harvey is our passive provoke death immune unit. I sort of built him evade by habit, but again, I don't think Amon actually does any physical, so that was a bit pointless. And then he has LB fill stuff like Dragon's Brush and Call of the Wild, because I don't have his EX2 for Warring Spirit. Zon's gear didn't really matter. He's got some leftover stuff from back when he was my old provoker, before I found out reflectoring wasn't allowed. And his mandatory piece of gear was Anti-Decay Amulet, which I guess kind of helps because I think it has a break immunity autocast that he can share around, so that's quite handy, but that was just given to us. And then Titus, who's our main damage dealer here, had to be between 5800 and 6800 attack, and I've got him with a greatsword build to use Noppy's Weapon in Peril, and specifically Rain's STMR here gives him a 10% fire amp for phase 1, which is handy. And then I can't show Fina's gear from the screen, but the only thing with her was that Sword of Kings was also a mandatory equip on her. The rest of her gear does not matter. I did it with autofill. So to get into the actual fight here, we'll go in, and there will be a much faster version of this fight on the actual stream, but I'll sort of take it a bit slower here. Ooh. Oh, I left my auto repeat on, so I'm going to immediately have to restart that. One moment. Let's try that one again. So a lot of this clear has some actions that are a bit unnecessary or overkill because it was quite comfortable, but might as well go through them anyway. So Noppy starts with the Magnus. This does some mitigations, but Celeste does those as well. So this is mainly for the AoE 30 LB fill to help Harvey out, because we want to get his LB charged by turn 3. And Celeste is going to just cover and double Nethicite, and she's going to do this every single turn to just mostly to soak up all of the magic attacks and the healing. Now, her Nethicite is being used twice, but it only actually comes into effect once because Nethicite stacks the same way as Mirage and Reflect, but she just doesn't have a double cast, so that's why we triple cast that. Harvey is just going to put up some breaks, as well as a killer buff that'll last till turn 3, 100% to Reapers, and he is going to die to the preemptive regen that he provoked, but we'll just revive him next turn. We could dispel it, but just like Season 4, we don't really mind if he dies. So Zon is going to start by, he's going to get ready to steal Titus's imbue that he's going to do, share it around the party, and then Nethicite a spell, because basically without Reflect Ring we want at least two Nethicites every turn to soak up those first 2 guaranteed healing magics that Amon's going to do. But he has to wait to act until Titus does, so he really just needs to fire imbue this turn, but we'll also just put up some MP recovery and some weak buffs that don't matter. And Fina is going to be able to... Now I just realised I've done this in the wrong order, because normally I would do Fina's third action as Mighty Guard, but that's blue magic, so it might eat one of my Nethicite stacks. So instead I will just fill a bit of LB with her. And then Zon can take that fire and spread it around. And that's not really important because Titus kind of does all the damage by himself, but it at least lets Noppy and Zon element chain. So into turn 2 we just start with the revive so we don't Nethicite it, but also so Harvey can get any LB drops. Celeste is just going to do the same thing, so we'll reload. Noppy puts up Greatsword in Peril for Titus, and technically does some attack and magic buffs, but they're just as good as the ones Titus will do for himself next turn when his SLB charges. So Zon needs to Nethicite this turn. Titus is pretty free to just throw in a few spiral cuts. They won't really do any significant damage, but it's slightly like just make sure that there's no variance in hitting the threshold next turn. Let those go off. So Celeste takes very little damage from the actual magic that Amon throws out. I think most of the fight damage she takes in this fight is actually just from her self-regen. So this is our first big burst turn. We have Noppy go back to base form because the water weapon in his shift form is bad for now. So they're just going to triple SR with Zon. And Titus will be ready to cap that. Before we put that up though, we do Harvey's LB to upgrade from 83 to 87% breaks to get a fair bit more damage. And then we can just chain those up. Those all time nicely with triple SR to cap just when all activated together. So now we hit the 50% threshold as well as the 75. So there's going to be a single target death that Harvey will nullify, and then an AoE Dispel and Petrify that everyone's Petrify immune, and the Dispel won't matter too much because Celeste's cover will go up first, and then we can just rebuff next turn. So he does his normal stuff that gets Neth-sided, Celeste covers the magic, and then the threshold stuff comes in, but generally isn't very threatening. So now the fourth turn is a little more sketchy because this is when Amon throws in a third full life near the end of the turn. So we need 3 Neth-side stacks this turn, because thankfully his Elemental Magic and his Meteor and Ultima aren't actually Neth-sideable spells, even though they have the same names as ones. So that's some relief at least, otherwise that might be a bit harder to deal with. So Fina's just going to rebuff her barriers and resists, just so Celeste is nice and safe, even if it's not too necessary. And the other thing we want to be doing this turn is some hits to just eat up those 5 Mirage stacks that Amon gets when changing elements. So Noppy's going to be one of our Neth-siders. Zon can do a Neth-side and a single chain hit. And I think Noppy's Barrage... Oh, never mind, Noppy's not hitting this turn. That was an uglier. But Titus needs to set up his water for now that that's Amon's new weakness. Amp it by 30% with his Grandis, and then Spiral Cut, which will count as 2 hits against those Mirages. Havoc can just hit 4 times, he's the main Mirage Eater here. So we'll launch them all off. And most of those hits are missing, but a couple are getting through, which means we got rid of them all. Celeste does her usual. Gosh, that's a very intense animation for very little damage. So we're gonna sort of get a bit of unnecessary extra damage here by having Noppy use her Shift LB to set up some mod boosts for her chains next turn, even though Titus will finish it off by himself. Harvey can put up his SLB just to make sure that those 87% breaks are nice and fresh. The Imperils don't actually matter because Amon has self-Imperils of 400% that override everything else. And Celeste and Fina will just be our Neth-sides. And Titus can do some triple chaining with his good cooldown. This is kind of just serves as a comparison of kind of how well his chains hit compared to his SLB. It's not nothing, but it's certainly a lot less. We'll see. So they get him, yeah, just below 25. So we'll probably see an Ultima here. But again, Celeste still just takes everything incredibly well in this fight, so that's not really an issue. Cool, and then the SLB is charged again, auto-buffing Titus. However, it can give him some killer buffs back, which, now that it's off cooldown, again, not really necessary. And then we just have Noppy do her good chains along with Zon's SR chains. And then these pop off, and that's my fixed trial challenge clear done. So you can see a much faster version of that on the stream where I was racing against Saiyan Knight and Deuce, but I just thought I would upload a sort of slower one that explained everything, since the others seem to be doing that too. So I thought that'd be kind of neat and a nice way to try out this trial content as a bit of an extra on the pod channel. So you can see the damage breakdown there. It's almost all Titus. I think Amon only has 3 billion health, so lots of overkill there as well. So anyway, we'll get the odd one of these if it's not too terrible, I guess. Might come back for Gloomwing or Vengeful Morgana, maybe even Clash, or like revisiting Warmech if people are especially interested or I feel like it. But for now, that's pretty much it. I'll also probably try get some just anniversary summons for Sylvie up tomorrow. But until then, see you next time.